Indeed, my name is Josephine. I'm a hematologist at the Amsterdam UMC, and I'm very happy to be here. I want to thank the organization, for inviting me, but also for organizing this. Talked to a few people. I think education in general, but education in rare diseases is super important, and I always want to contribute whenever I'm asked to do it, because I think patient empowerment and understanding your disease really helps a lot. So for today, we thought you heard a lot about clinical trials today, and a clinical trial might have all sorts of associations for you. Maybe it sounds appealing, maybe it sounds exciting, maybe it just sounds scary, or like something you should never do, or I don't know. And I thought it might be good to explain a little bit more about what are clinical trials, why do we do them, how do we do that. And then the star of the day is sitting right next to me. This is Ellie. And Ellie, because I said it will be good to have a story of a patient who's been in the clinical trial. Now, my patients, they might speak English, but their first language is Dutch. So Ellie is actually a patient from Shirley de Saas Clinic who volunteered to be here with me on the stage today.
Yep. Thank you for asking me.
Yes, and we already met online. So
we did.
We already are friends now, so we're completely comfortable. But I told her also, just tell whatever you want to tell, but if there are bits you don't want to share here, then it's also perfectly fine. So, okay, well, let's get started. My disclosures. So what I want to discuss today is, what is a clinical trial? Why do we do them? What type of clinical trials are there? Then we get to Ellie's story, and then I'll show you what trials are currently ongoing in Europe and the UK that I know of. I've borrowed some slides from clinical trial units in Ontario because I thought they were very illustrative. But a clinical trial is a type of research where it involves people, and you want to test some intervention. So you want to see if it's usually a disease, and you do something about the disease, usually some treatment like a drug, but it can also be an orthopedic surgery device. And you want to see how is that treatment safe? Very important. Does this treatment actually improve the disease or help people live longer? And third, but not least important, does the treatment actually help people feel better? So does it help you for your quality of life? So these are actually the three things that you're always looking for when you're doing a clinical trial. So in the end, these clinical trials are going to help us decide what the best treatment might be for a certain disease. So without clinical trials, we would be nowhere, to be honest, in medicine. It's the only way to advance clinical medicine, and that's why we keep going on about them. Even if they're a lot of work and they're a lot of hassle, this is the only way forward. So why do we do clinical trials in Waldenstrom? I often make this picture because we have so many options in Waldenstrom now, not only apples and oranges, but we have a whole fruit bowl of options to compare already. We have rituximab, we have various chemotherapies, we have various BTK inhibitors that were discussed, we have transplantations, we have maintenance therapy, or maybe not, or bortezomib, venetoclax, ixazomib, and there's lots of things coming on the stage. So how are we ever going to understand which treatment to use in which patient, in which order? Should you start with this one and then wait for that one? Or how long should we use a medication? Or should you use maintenance or not? Now, in a rare disease, it's very difficult to answer all of these questions, but clinical trials are a way to systematically evaluate what might be the best treatment. And so one side of that is to make sure that people get the most effective treatment, but the other side is also that they get a treatment that is safe and keeps their quality of life intact. So balancing all these things. And I might add, because I talked to a couple of people about this today, because I developed clinical trials also as part of my work as a research hematologist, and it is a lot of work. I just told Christian Busca I'd rather do another PhD than develop another clinical trial in a way, because it's really a lot of work, a lot of paperwork, a lot of regulations, a lot of dealing with companies, pharma companies, money, forever. It goes on forever. But I have a couple of patients in my clinic that got diagnosed quite at an early age, and I know they're going to need new treatments when they get further along the road. And I always keep them in mind. And I think we have to keep developing new treatments. If it's only for those people, and for all the other people, we want treatments that are even better or even safer. So that is the ultimate driver, I guess. So the ultimate goal, of course, like Christian mentioned, like a patient said, I want to take one pill, no side effects, and I want to be cured. I said, okay, yeah, I want that too, but it's not realistic at the moment. I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon, but that is the goal that we can keep working towards in the very far future. Realistic goals that we work on right now is we can look at developing treatments that give you a longer remission or that have better tolerability, that give you better quality of life, or maybe that can give you a long treatment-free interval so that you can enjoy a long time that you are without treatment. Or for some indications like amyloid, maybe for the people who attended Jahan's session, you want to get a very deep remission, so we want to develop treatments that can do that. There are special populations like amyloidosis, high-grade transformation, Bing-Neill, they all also need their own approach. So there are still lots of questions that we want to make advancement in the area of Waldenstrom. You don't need to read the slide, but this is just to show you at our international workshops, so where all the Waldenstrom doctors from the world meet, we actually discuss what should the goals be. If we do clinical trials, we cannot do 200 clinical trials on Waldenstrom because there's only so many patients. So we want to do those trials that will learn us the things that matter. And we actually made a list of the priorities. So we wrote down, like, what are the things that we want to develop in Waldenstrom, that we want to focus our trials on, that we want to spend our time and energy and money on. And this is the list that came up at the last meeting. You can read the paper. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's just to show you that we do really think very critically about what are we researching and what matters the most. So you may have heard about the phases of clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And I will very briefly go into this. If you ever enter a trial, your doctor will tell you more about it. Phase 1 is very early stage. Sometimes first in human or first in certain disease. So it's when you really still want to test safety. So for Waldenstrom, this may be a drug that's already been approved in another lymphoma, and you want to test if it's safe in Waldenstrom, for example. So it's been used before, but you want to be very careful when you first use it in Waldenstrom. So there's only a couple of patients in these phase 1 trials. And when a new drug is developed, it's done in healthy volunteers. And like I said, when a drug is already approved, but not for that indication, it can be patients. Phase 2 is when you already went to the phase 1 stage and you want to get a little bit more information about how effective a drug may be. So the trials are a bit larger. And phase 3 is when you already have good impression from the phase 1 and phase 2 trial that the drug is safe and it's relatively effective. And now you want to be more certain about how much more effective is it than the treatment that we already have. So you're going to enter more patients. Those trials are larger. They're very often international. These trials might also be what we call randomized. So it means that that a lottery determines whether you get treatment A and B, and it allows for the researchers to compare in a very clean way. Afterward, that trial, we can really decide which of the two is better and how much better and why. So it allows for a very direct comparison. Yes. Placebo is when you randomize against a fake drug. That's not going to be done at Waldenstrom anymore. It's not ethical. There's so many effective drugs that you cannot give Waldenstrom patients placebo anymore. So I don't think you're going to be offered any of that. The Rainbow trial in the UK that we're going to talk about is a randomized trial where people are randomized by chance between DRC chemotherapy, immunochemotherapy versus ibrutinib. Two very different trials, treatments, but very important because this is a big question in Waldenstrom. So I'm going to turn a little bit this way now. I think, Ellie, when we've met online, I asked you, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell you your story about your Waldenstrom journey.
Yeah, sure, of course. So my name's Ellie. I was diagnosed with Waldenstrom's in 2020. So in February 2020, just before the COVID pandemic, which is really great timing on my behalf, I got diagnosed with Waldenstrom. So I've been feeling very breathless, very tired. I've got 2 little children at home who were like, Mummy, why are you always sleeping? Why do you want to go to bed all the time? Why are you always out of breath? And I thought, well, that's a very good question. I've been going backwards and forwards to the doctor, who'd been saying, oh, you're okay. You're just a busy mum. You work full time. You'll be fine. And I kept going back. And in the end, thankfully, a doctor said, oh, look, just humour me. Go and have a blood test. So I remember it was a Friday morning. I thought, oh, great, I get a Friday morning off work. Went and had a blood test. And then by Friday afternoon, I had a phone call from the doctor saying, I don't know how you're still standing up. Your hemoglobin level is 66. You shouldn't be. Get yourself to ambulatory care right now. Drop what you're doing and go. Don't even go to A&E, go straight through. So I thought, oh, yeah, this will be fine, no problem. So off we went, left my children at home, went to the hospital with my mum and dad. Sat there, didn't think too much about it. And a consultant was sort of poking around my stomach area saying to me, is that uncomfortable? And I said, well, actually, yes, it is. Could you stop? And he said, oh, that can often be an early sign of leukemia. I went, oh, thanks very much. That's a great thing to hear at that time. Thanks. But he said, look, what we'll do is we'll run some further blood tests. We'll give you some iron tablets. Off you go. If you need anything else, we'll phone you, but hopefully we won't see you again. And then that was a Friday evening. Monday morning, the phone goes, we found some abnormalities in your blood tests. And that was the start, really. So from that point on, I had a couple of weeks of CT scans, of bone marrow biopsies, all the tests, the lovely tests that I'm sure most of you in this room have been through at some time or another. And then 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with WM at the age of 39. So unfortunately, the consultant that told me that was a general haematologist rather than expert. So I think she'd Googled WM and told me I had 6 years to live at that point. Yeah. So I wasn't the best car journey home I've ever had. Thankfully, for all of us, I was referred to the wonderful Shirley at UCLH, who quickly put that right for us all, which was a wonderful relief. And I went through then at that point, that was just before the pandemic really hit and we were all put into lockdown. So I probably should have had treatment round about that point, but I think Shirley and I decided between the two of us it would probably be too dangerous. So we left it, and I had...
Because of the COVID.
Because of the COVID. Shirley wasn't sure that it wouldn't be too dangerous for me to have treatment at that point because it would have zapped my immune system, and we didn't know enough about COVID at that point. So trust me to get something like this at that point. So we had a chat every couple of weeks about how I was feeling, and I got through to October feeling pretty bad. And at that point just said, I can't do it anymore. Don't worry about COVID. Let's just please, can I be treated? And that's when the Rainbow trial was introduced to me up at UCLH.
So I think you told me they already mentioned that trial when you were referred, right?
Yeah, so the lovely lady that told me I had 6 years to live also told me, because of my age, because I was so young, if there was any clinical trials to be participated in, then I would probably be a good candidate because of my age and because people are always interested in younger patients and how we may respond to medication as opposed to maybe a slightly older patient and people they're used to seeing.
And what was your initial thought when they said something about a clinical trial, like your first association?
My initial thought was positive. I can't really tell you why, but I think anything I've ever heard about clinical trials has always been a good thing. It's always helped people. It's always given people a chance, maybe something they might not have had with other medication. So I was open to it. My head was kind of all over the place, as I'm sure lots of you can relate to. When you first get diagnosed, I sort of thought, well, I'll be steered in whatever direction, the medical profession think I should go to.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'd be open to that if that is something. Obviously, I want to find out more about it. And then we kind of left that there. And as we got to that October and they said, well, actually, this Rainbow trial is ongoing. Would you be interested? I said, well, yes, I would. I'd like to find out more about it. So they emailed everything over to me. I had, So
you get like this, they call it an informed consent form.
Yes, exactly that.
But it really is like 20 pages with a lot of information.
Yes.
And what I always hear from my patients, part of the information is also always a lot about the risks and because we have to, right? There are all these rules that we have to warn about everything.
Yeah.
So how did you feel reading all of that information?
So I kind of gave myself, I did like 3 pages a day. And I was like, right, I'm just going to leave that there, take that in, write down any questions I've got. And the people at UCLH, the trials team were fantastic, gave me someone I could call anytime if I had any questions, if I didn't understand anything, if I was unsure. So I contacted them a few times just to reassure me about things that I wasn't quite sure about or any terminology I didn't understand. So it took me a little while to get through it, but there was no pressure on their behalf. They were very grateful. They were very encouraging and also said to me, you don't have to do this. So there's no pressure on our side. If you decide you want to do it and then you decide you don't, that's absolutely fine.
Well, this is very important, right?
Yeah,
I think it's a very important concept. This is always, I always say clinical trial is an option that you can take, but it's just that. It's an option next to the other ones, because what would have been Well, we're going to talk about the trial in a bit, but what were you offered as an alternative to the trial? So if you would not enter...
So then I think it probably would have been a discussion between Shirley and myself as to what would have been the best thing.
Yeah.
So I was on the randomized phase 3, I think, parts of it. So I didn't know whether I was going to get the chemotherapy part or the ibrutinib part.
Which is really hard because it's just a lottery that determines whether you're going to have 6 months of immunochemo or pills forever. Very different.
Yes, exactly.
So how did you feel about handing out that decision?
So, I'll be honest, I got the DRC chemotherapy side and I was disappointed initially. And I said, well, actually, I don't really want to do chemotherapy. It scares me. I don't really want to do it. I'd rather just take a pill and get on with my life.
You were hoping for the...
I was hoping for that, and I didn't get it. But actually, I then spoke to my consultant at the time, who worked with Shirley, who was fantastic, and said, look, if you want my opinion, I think you've got the best side, because my spleen was huge and it pushed my kidney round to the back. So it wasn't working properly. And she said, look, we know DRC works. We know it's going to work for you. Hopefully, we're very sure it will work for you. So I think you've got the best side. It's tried and tested. And, I suspect even after one session, you'll start to feel better. So, and I did. She was right.
And was there anyone, because I think I met you, I think you're a very optimistic person. So you always think something good will come of this. And, But there may be people in your environment who said, like, you're going to be maybe like, why are you going to do something experimental, or why are you going into this project? Or was there anyone having doubts?
Yeah, there was a few friends that said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. You're like a guinea pig, or, you'll get stuck with it and then they won't let you get out of it. And, it's all stuff that they haven't tested before and all those types of things. But that's absolutely not the case. And, that I get those things that people think, but they are misconceptions at the end of the day. I think clinical trials are so important, particularly as we've heard today. If we're going to beat WM, we've got to do it together. And you can't do it without us and we can't do it without you. So
yes,
if we work together, it works for me right now as on a personal level. I feel great. I've been treatment-free now for 3 years and I feel brilliant. I've got my life back. I'm not exhausted anymore. I feel like hopefully a normal person. But on another level, hopefully it helps everybody in this room and all the people that are coming behind us. But you guys can't do the brilliant work you do if we don't help.
Well, it's true. I do think it's the only way forward for us to do clinical trials. At the same time, I do think as a person, you really have to want to do that and stand behind your decision. And it should never be an obligation. No one should feel guilty because they don't go into it.
Absolutely.
So it should be the right thing for you to do. And can you tell us a little bit about what was it like to be in the clinical trial? So once it started.
Yeah. So I had someone that I could go to at any time, who gave me, a name, an email address, a number. If I ever had any questions or any concerns, she was there whenever I went up to the hospital for my treatment. She would greet me. She would answer any questions I had. She would come and visit me throughout the day. Any kind of active monitoring appointments I had in between, she would be there. She would sit in the room with me. She would make sure the consultant was doing what they should be doing.
You said to me, you felt like a VIP.
I did, because she used to say, "Oh, don't worry about the waiting room." So all these people looking at me, going, "Who the hell is that?" Thinking they can just waltz through and just have all their stuff done when we've been sat here for half an hour. But I did. I honestly felt like a private patient, because they'd go, "Oh yeah, we'll don't worry about them. We'll see you now." And I used to think,
well, the thing is, if you're in a clinical trial, you have to follow a very strict schedule of assessments, so it's not so flexible. So we always feel like because we ask people to do all these assessments, we have to help them get through the whole protocol.
For once in my life, I felt like a VIP, except for today, obviously. But I have to say, afterwards as well, so once all the treatment had finished, so I did 6 rounds of DRC between October 2020 and February 2021. And I had extra bone marrow biopsies, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on how you feel about those.
Because of the trial?
Yeah, because of the trial. So I had extra scans, extra biopsies. So I knew far more than I may have done about the actual results of my treatment far quicker, because I was on the trial, because they were obligated to do those things.
Extra tests.
And I knew very quickly that actually I'd had a very, very positive response. So apart from feeling a lot better, I knew that the disease burden was a lot better and my blood tests were coming back better, and, everything was looking far more positive. So
it's really wonderful to hear that you did so well and that you're doing so well. So you had a very good experience.
I had an excellent, I wouldn't hesitate to do it again. So.
Of course, I also told Ellie, it's never a guarantee if you enter a clinical trial. It's like with any other treatment. There may be side effects. You may have a good response or bad response. There's no way we can guarantee anything, of course.
No.
But
Well, the rituximab did not like me at all, not one bit.
but it would have been the same outside the clinic.
It would have been. Yeah, it absolutely would have been. But, you know, like you said, there's a whole page full of risks, but what's the alternative? Didn't fancy that very much. So I thought, well, we'll go with it. But yeah.
So what would you recommend to people that are offered a clinical trial as an option?
I would say do your research. Very much like we heard earlier, you know, make sure you write all your questions down. Don't leave it to your memory, because I tried to do that. It doesn't work because you get so bogged down with all the information that's coming at you.
So make a list.
Yeah, make a list and, you know, maybe break it into chunks so you don't miss anything of what's expected of you, because there can be quite a lot of appointments, quite a lot of scans and things that you're expected to do as part of the trial. So you will need to kind of juggle your life around a little bit. So just make sure you're able to commit to that. But kind of in the back of my head, I always thought, actually, I'm doing this not only for me, but hopefully for all the people that have got WM now and all those people that don't know they're going to get it, but are coming behind us. And, you know, I would recommend to anybody, if you can do it, not just for yourselves, but for everybody else and for people like you that continue to try and help us all.
Well, thank you so much, Ali. I think we discussed a lot of the things that we wanted to get through, and you really explained very well the whole process. And I really like the way you told that you read the information 3 pages a day and then collected all your questions, because I think that is very important. Because if you have doubts about anything in the information, or you have doubts about whether this is something for you, then that's exactly when you should talk to your doctor or your team, and they should explain to you all the dilemmas.
Well, initially it's quite overwhelming. There's quite a lot of paper.
Exactly.
And so I printed it out and went, whoa, I'm not going to be able to take all that in and, you know.
And I must be honest, there's also people who don't want to know all details, and they say, and then with them I go through it and I highlight the things that I find very important, and I say, at least, you know, look at this part and look at this part, and make sure you've went through it at least, you know, broadly.
And actually normally with my WM appointments, if I go and see Shirley or one of her brilliant team up at UCLH, well, I'm one of those patients that goes, actually, I don't really need to know about the numbers. I'm not really bothered. Just tell me whether I'm all right or not. Yeah, exactly that. Like the quicker the appointment for me, the better. Someone go, yeah, you're great. I'll see you in 3 months. Brilliant. See you later. I don't want a big list of this is your hemoglobin, this is your paraprotein. You know, if it's okay.
So everyone's different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's me. So normally I wouldn't be as organised as reading a whole thing of clinical trial information. I thought, actually, this is a pretty big decision.
Exactly.
For not only me, but my family and everybody else. So I need to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
And I think it's very normal and healthy to have questions after you've been given that type of information. You should talk to your team.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing this.
It's a pleasure.
Ellie's going to be around, and you told me people can come up if they have questions, but I also told her if you don't want to answer things, it's also
I'm very open, so please feel free to ask me anything. It's fine.
What I wanted to do is tell a little bit more about how you can deal with clinical trials as a patient. So one thing is, how do you find a clinical trial? Because it may be offered to you, but you may also be in a hospital because clinical trials are opened in certain centers, but not in every hospital, because it takes a lot of time and effort and paperwork to open a trial at a certain clinic, so that you cannot just open it in the whole country. So if you wonder about this, you might talk to your doctor. That's the first step, and they may be aware of trials in your country. You can ask the health charity or patient organization, the WMUK or IWMF. They may be aware of trials. You can contact a big center that's specialized in your disease. Well, you can use Google. That's always an option. Or you can use a site that's called clinicaltrial.gov. It's a bit technical, but it's very comprehensive. Every clinical trial in the world is obliged to be registered with this organization. So it's going to be there, and you can filter on your disease and on the region that you're in, and you can look at trials that are open or closed or finished. So this is a thing you can do. It takes a bit of effort, but it's a way. And then if you enter Waldenstrom in the UK, you get all the clinical trials that are open in the UK right now. So it's a very good source of information. So how do you determine if a clinical trial is a good idea for you? Where is it? If you have to travel 2.5 hours for every appointment, you may not want to do it. Or you can ask for reimbursement. Sometimes you get a reimbursement for traveling. Our costs covered, for example, our traveling costs covered, because that might make a difference for you. And, well, you know, every clinical trial has to be approved by the regulatory agency, the ethics board, and the hospital. So you should not worry about this, because it's illegal to run a clinical trial without having all these. That's why it takes so long to open one, because you have to go through all the loops. And And one important thing is every trial has eligibility criteria. So for example, you may have something like as another drug that you're using that's not compatible, or you may have kidney function that's not good enough for this trial. So don't be disappointed. They can screen beforehand. Before they send you to a center, they can already discuss with the doctor there, like, is this roughly compatible with the trial? So that's another thing that's very important to realize. So it's not just you have Waldenstrom, you need to fit all these other criteria as well. You may always consider not starting treatment when you're sick. It's not something that we generally recommend, but it's your right to do whatever you want. You can always go for standard treatment. Clinical trial is never an obligation. Of course, some people don't have any standard treatments available anymore, and then you're very happy there's clinical trial because you've run out of options. And maybe there's more clinical trials in a different part of your country that's fitting better to your situation. So that these are things to consider. What if there isn't any clinical trial? Well, then you can either go for your normal treatment but try to keep up to date, because in the future you may still enter something else. And what if you're offered a trial and it just doesn't feel right, and you think, I have a feeling in my belly that I shouldn't do this? You can always say no. I always say it's an option that you're offered that you can take, but it's not an obligation in any way. So also, I always say it's not a contract. Once you enter the trial and you want to get out for whatever reason, you don't even need to tell me, then you're fine. There's no punishment, there's no fine or whatever. That would be very strange. Other way around, if I think it's better for you not to be in the trial anymore, we will take you out as well. So we need your signature on the informed consent, because otherwise we are not allowed to put you in the trial. But it's not an obligation, so it's not a contract. So the informed consent is always voluntarily. You can withdraw it at any time, and it's an ongoing progress, so you may change your mind for whatever reason. So I looked up at clinicaltrial.gov what trials are currently ongoing in Europe and the UK, and as you can see by the flags, there's lots of trials going on in the UK at the moment, to be honest. I haven't marked all the hospitals, as some of the trials are not just dedicated to Waldenstrom, but they're lymphoma general, but Waldenstrom patients can also enter, which is fine, because you still have access to it. The Rainbow trial is a very special trial because it's a first-line treatment and it's randomized. So I think it's almost full, like probably hopefully for the end of the year, I think. But there's a whole lot of other trials going on. We have an initiative by Christian, actually. So it's run in Germany, in Greece, and some other countries, not the Netherlands, not the UK at least. We have the carfilzomib trial that's called SAR1 study from the European Consortium. In Utrecht, we have a trial called the Magnus trial, specifically for anti-magneropathy. And we have a trial within HOVON, initiated by our center in 4 European countries, especially for cold agglutinin disease. So some trials may be targeted at specific groups. And there's some trials that are coming this year. So a lot of European countries will open the next European Consortium trial using venetoclax versus DRC. Very important randomized trial. There will be a French trial with short-term zanubrutinib with a venetoclax type drug that's going to be opened as well. And our trial, well, it's not open yet. We hope to open it at the beginning of next year, sometime next year. With the bispecific antibody that we're very excited about, because it's a whole different approach. So that's really important for people who've used many options already, and you want to come in from a completely different angle.